Hello, everyone. I'm Karen Smith, the Agriculture Lead for the COVID-19 Vulnerable Supply Chains Facility. I'm very pleased to be joining you today to showcase some of the work that's been conducted under the project, which is part of the FCDO-funded Business Partnerships for Global Goals programme. I'm joined today by Rias, Social Development Advisor and Lead Advisor on BP for GG, FCDO, Richard Fox, Sustainability Director at Flamingo Horticulture Limited, and Isaiah Muiri, Technical Manager and Senior Trainer at Flower Watch. So if I could start with Rania, what were FCDO's drivers in designing the Business Partnerships for Global Goals programme? And how important is collaboration with industry to help address the challenges of COVID-19 and the climate change crisis?
Hi, Karen. Very interesting question. So to start with, FCDO wanted to understand how companies were tackling leading social and environmental challenges. Building on our experience from previous programs, working on responsible and inclusive business, which I'll refer to as RIB here, such as RATE and BIF, we wanted to consolidate best practice as well as act as a catalyst for innovative approaches from the private sector that could and will positively impact on the bottom billion. The ambition was to use BP for GG to engage in businesses beyond the typical CSR approach into mainstreaming ESG reporting and disclosures to the business as usual model. By April 2020, it was evident that COVID-19 pandemic was impacting on global scales. High street closures of shops and brands in the UK were impacting in Africa, in Asia as well, through global supply chains. FCDO's previous programming on responsible and inclusive business had demonstrated the important role of businesses and how these can be pivoted to protect the vulnerable. We pivoted BP for GG to focus on the terrible impact of the pandemic on supply chains through establishing the Vulnerable Supply Chain Facility. The VSCF has collaborated with key brands in garments and agriculture and supply chains to address the immediate challenges faced by workers, but also longer-term challenges which were identified. Using a co-creation model, VSCF and partners ensured support to workers through demand falls in supply chains. Flamingo, for example, reached close to 18,000 workers in Kenya, maintaining jobs despite the flower sector having a market loss and downsizing through the COVID period. Even before the pandemic, though, the impact of climate change was disrupting the livelihoods of low-income producers in Africa. Through VSCF, Fair Trade Cocoa partnerships, over 7,000 farmers in Ghana received climate change awareness training and crop diversification. So in looking at all of this, BP for GG has reached a total of over 500,000 workers in agriculture and garments industries. And this is actually against an initial sort of predicted 200,000. What this shows is that partnerships are important and that working through partnerships is going to be a cornerstone in achieving sustainable global supply chains, but also in meeting the SDGs.
Thank you so much, Rania, for setting that background for us. So if we dive in a bit to a particular project, the Sea Freight Flowers project was triggered by the impact COVID-19 had on air freight availability and also increased costs, which led to problems exporting flowers from Kenya. So the project team demonstrated the viability of sea freighting flowers by facilitating 13 containers between Mombasa Port and Europe. Isaiah, you were involved in the project. So what was key to this success and what transformations are you seeing in the industry as a result?
Thank you for your question, Karen. The big success was contributed by the funding from the UK government. So many farms, many importers, they see this as a very cheap way of sending their flowers by sea. And at the same time, as you mentioned, there was scarcity of airspace, and it was also very expensive. So the funding from the UK government contributed a lot to this success. Another thing that contributed to the success of this was the technical support that the industry was getting from especially from the Flower Watch team, assuring them that the products can arrive to the market by sea rather than being used to the air freight that they are used to be shipping flowers. Another success which contributed this was people, they wanted also to maintain their workers. They don't want to lose people who they have been trained there for more than 30 years. They wanted to keep them and also keep the customer. Otherwise, if there was no space in sea freight, they could lose their customer and their market. In terms of transformation, what I have seen in the industry after this project is that several firms has come together, and then now they consolidate in one farm or in one freight forwarder, and then they manage to ship one container per week as a group, because it's very difficult for small scale growers to fill up the container. Another thing that I have seen transforming in the industry is that I can see now the growers and the importers managing properly their sales, meaning especially the big occasions like Valentine, like Mother's Day. Now they can plan properly. They can even ship the flowers 1 month earlier to the occasion. And also something, not forgetting the managing of the fluctuation of the market. So high demand, low demand as compared to high production. That's what I can see transforming the industry.
Thank you so much, Isaiah. Yeah, absolutely. Some really key changes going on there in the industry. So Richard, Flamingo's been behind the project. And what we've seen is that sea freighting flowers produces 95% less greenhouse gas emissions than air freight, which is an incredible reduction. I know Flamingo has other innovations to try and reduce its carbon footprint. Could you tell us a bit about those as well?
Yes, Karen, and as you say, whilst the biggest part of our carbon footprint is the air freight component, we have been looking at a number of other areas where we can reduce our carbon emissions. For example, looking at alternative growing areas closer to market and closer to transit routes. We've also looked again at introducing solar power, although in Kenya, for example, more than 85% of our power is from renewable sources, be it hydro, geothermal or wind. So we're well placed in that respect. We've been looking at a reduction in the use of manufactured chemicals and pesticides by using greener methods and integrated pest management. Of course, we take every opportunity we can to grow more trees and for sequestering carbon, although my own feeling is there's an equally good benefit of planting trees in terms of environmental restoration and improving land. And finally, we're looking to see how we can measure carbon sequestration actually in our growing process, because obviously we're growing a product which takes in CO2, and we're just seeing how much of that, finding ways to see how much of that is retained through the growing cycle. So those are the main ways at the moment we're looking, other than the sea freight component, which, as you mentioned, is the major part of our footprint.
Thank you, Richard. Sounds like you're tackling it from all angles. That's really interesting. So Isaiah, what else can be done to encourage, enable greater uptake of sea freighting perishables from Kenya to Europe and elsewhere?
Yeah, I think Kenyan government can play a critical leadership role in supporting this infrastructure in Kenya to facilitate the sea freight. That is the SGR and all the parties involved. Another thing that I can mention at this point is the efficiencies of the government agencies, such as Kenya Revenue Authority, Kenya Plant Health and Services, Port of Mombasa, maybe training, because they are used to import and not to deal with perishables. So there's a big road. Also, the UK and Europe government can join hands to support the industry in Kenya. And lastly, maybe if the Kenya government can transfer 20% of the current air freight shipment to sea, we can end up having 100 containers a week. Yeah, I think that's the way forward.
Thanks, Isaiah. The vision of 100 containers a week is certainly really exciting. And you mentioned the SGR there. That's the railway in Kenya, which could also transport flowers potentially. So Richard, how does Flamingo view the future of using sea freight to export flowers and other fresh produce from Kenya and more widely from East Africa? What do you see as the key benefits and the key challenges going forward?
If we can reduce the amount of cargo that we send by air freight, then it's going to reduce our carbon footprint. I think it's going to take quite some time to get this whole process in, because as I mentioned, there's a lot of links in this chain to get the product to market. And the market, of course, has been used to its just-in-time way of looking at ordering products by picking up the phone and expecting them air freight 48 hours later on their shelves. So there's going to have a lot of changes, but I think it's doable. And of course, one of the things you mentioned earlier was that as part of COVID effects, we lost a lot of air freight capacity. And of course, this put businesses at risk and jobs at risk. So by introducing an alternative way of getting our products to market through sea freight, we reduce our business risk, which is obviously an important thing for us. And of course, the reduction that sea freight offers in terms of reducing our CO2 emissions by, as you mentioned, 85%. But we've got a way to go. But there are facilities in place, like Isaiah mentioned, the railway. We need to try and establish a green route to get products through the port. But of course, boats don't turn up at ports at the same frequency as airplanes turn up at airports. So, this is where the whole supply chain has got to readjust. But it's doable, and I think it's something we must take very seriously.
Thank you, Richard, and thanks all of you for your insights. I just want to round off the session today by asking everybody how you plan to harness partnerships to move forward the exciting opportunity for sea freight out of Kenya. Perhaps Isaiah, if you could go first.
Thank you, Karen. I think for me it's very simple. It's selling the importance of sea freight concept to many countries in the region and also across the globe, just to make sure that we are going green to reduce the carbon print. Just sell the concept of sea freight, sea freight, sea freight.
Thank you, Isaiah. I love your passion. Richard, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think business needs to get together because it's in the combined interest of business and make this work. It's no single business can actually influence all the players in the supply chain, but if we can as businesses get together, and as this project, which has gained support from the British government, which has been really helpful, it's brought individual companies together in the sort of pre-competitive space to come up with solutions so that we can, as an industry, push for the changes that will be needed to be able to move this product by sea more readily.
Thanks, Richard. And finally, Rania, what are your thoughts?
Hi, I think FCDO should use its convening power to continue building and scaling the strategic partnerships that VSCF has initiated and the evidence that we've got from that. And this will include not just collaborating with businesses, but also engaging with like-minded bilateral donors and facilitating local capacity build-up as well. So very similar to what Richard and Isaiah have been saying.
Thank you, Rania, Isaiah and Richard for all your thoughts today. Very exciting opportunities for Kenya, for sea freight, for flowers. So let's hope the whole project and continues to scale and we see results in carbon reduction. Thank you all.